Warpaints are severely underrated in TF2, that much is obvious. But why? Why does the item you can see while you play get completely overshadowed by hats and cosmetics you can't see 90% of the time? To really get to the bottom of this, we have to go way back to the start. 2009 was the year we first saw hats added in TF2 with the Sniper vs Spy update. At the time, hats were just a way for players to express themselves and add some customization to their favorite class. But not for long, because on September 30th, 2010, Valve released the Man Economy update. This update would change the way players see TF2 forever with the inclusion of unusual effects. Unusuals are particle effects that you have a small chance to unbox that could be either a part of your hat or float around it. And at the time of release, there were only 14 effects, but this update would cause an uproar of players wanting these effects for their hats too. This would eventually lead into the Steam community market being created, and more importantly, we would get the ability to exchange items with other players. Trading would end up becoming a massive market for many Valve games such as Dota 2, Team Fortress 2, and Counter-Strike. Now, CSGO is important for this story because of the influence CSGO ended up having on the creation of Warpaints. Released in August 2012, CSGO didn't have any sort of customization until August 2013 when they added the very first weapon case. This would be the start of the biggest market in gaming history, as this case added skins for your guns that you could unbox, which turned into a massive success. Not just because they look cool, these weapons had different rarities that would be harder to unbox than others, and wares that would change how beat up the gun looks. On top of that, some of these weapons would have different patterns numbered 0 to 1000 that could severely alter the value of the gun, and eventually CSGO would add the chance to unbox weapons with stat track counters, which work exactly like strange items in TF2 where it tracks your kills on weapons. All these different variables gave you the opportunity to unbox weapons with the perfect stats. For example, the stat track factory new pattern 661 AK case hardened, which is currently listed for $1 million. That's 1/5 of the price for a Caterpillar 797. The things I'd do for one of those. So what does any of this have to do with TF2? Well, before CSGO released, the only variants you could unbox in TF2 were Strange and Unusual. The chance to unbox a Strange is approximately 22.25%, and the chance to get an Unusual is about 1%. And that's all you could get back then, which made the market feel kind of stale. But that didn't stop people from valuing the Burning Flames team captain at a whopping $16,000 back in 2014. However, just 1 year later, in 2015, things would change with the Gun Mettle update. This update brought many elements from CSGO over to TF2. They added weapon skins with rarities and wares which followed the same color schemes and wear ratings as CSGO. And certain weapons even had rare patterns you could get. To top it all off, they had the added chance of being unboxed with unusual effects, just like the hats. All the weapon cases that were added followed some kind of theme, the concealed killer case being all camouflage weapons, the powerhouse case being themed around the map Powerhouse, the Pyroland case being all cutesy rainbows and candy, and the Warbird collection being war themed. Who would have thought? While the concepts were really cool, they limited the weapons you could get to stock for some reason, and some of the cases were bloated with the same skin just on different weapons. Remember when I said some weapons had rare variants? Those came in the form of stickers, but not like in CSGO where you can apply stickers wherever you'd like to make them more unique. They were fixed placements with a small percentage of showing up, and they were hardly noticeable. So while they were taking a step in the right direction, they were still missing some key features and customization options that were available in CSGO. Some of the skins picked weren't all that great either because they were ugly, took up space for more skins, and were limited to a select few stock weapons. So they stopped making them. But in 2017, 2 years after the last weapon case, Valve added the first Warpaint case. By the way, if you enjoy what you're watching, make sure you subscribe so one day I can make Jonerville a real city. Warpaints are pattern-based templates that can be applied to 45 different weapons. On paper, this is a step in the right direction because now you don't have to worry about unboxing a small selection of specific weapons with the same skin 4 times, and instead can unbox a plethora of different skins that you can apply to any weapon you want, except you can't. There are 160 unique weapons in TF2, yet you can only apply Warpaints to 45 of them. They don't even have all the stock weapons available. In fact, you can apply these reskins to the Holy Mackerel, a reskin of the stock bat, which isn't even an option when applying Warpaints. Like, at the very least, make it so you can apply them to all the stock weapons. This was a very half-assed update that is yet to change, and that's not even the worst part. 90% of the Warpaints you can get are garbage. Even some of the elite grade Warpaints look like trash. There are a few exceptions that I believe were great additions, such as the Dragon Slayer Warpaint, Death Deluxe, Freedom Wrapped, and Macaw Mask, just to name a few. Dragon Slayer, in my opinion, is closer to the original weapon skins. It adds this face to the Dragon's Fury and this little decal to the other weapons. I wish they made it so the dragon face appears on all the available weapons, because unlike the other Warpaints that can be applied to 45 different weapons, the Dragon Slayer Warpaint can only be applied to 9. They made it work for the Warhawk weapons, so why not here too? Keep this in mind because it's going to be a very important point I'm going to come back to later. The rest are really great examples of pattern-based weapon skins that I think are acceptable for lower tiers like Mercenary grade or Commando grade. The only bad part about them is that you can't stick them on any weapon, which I already mentioned earlier, so these are pretty much as good as it gets. There's one that stands out from the rest, and for good reason: Macaw Masked. And here's why. This is the Macaw Mask pattern. When unboxing this Warpaint, it randomly selects a small 205 by 205 pixel area on this giant 2048 by 2048 pattern twice. Once for the top half and once for the bottom. With all these different colors, this allows for patterns to have different meanings and values similar to the case hardened skins in CSGO. Now, this isn't the only Warpaint that does this, but it's the most notable one, as the different colors can wildly change the value. You got blue gems, green gems, red gems, yellow gems, and the rarest of all, white gems. In order to get a white gem, you have to be lucky enough to land within this tiny white square twice. Man, just thinking of the rarity would give any collector a hard on, and I would know. I'm rock solid right now. There's some other cool variations you can possibly get, like the rainbow patterns, fire and ice patterns, purple gems, and even teal gems. All these different Macaw Mask patterns are pretty sought after by collectors and can cost hundreds to even thousands of keys. I think this was an excellent step forward, but something still isn't right. If this is the equivalent of a CSGO blue gem, how come nobody aside from collectors care? Even the casual players of CSGO know the lore and value of blue gems, but in TF2, stuff like white gems are hardly talked about in comparison to something like the Burning Flames team captain, even though it's not as rare in comparison. That's because Warpaints are missing some key features that I think could push them to being as iconic as hats. First, I think Warpaints lack customization. Once you apply a Warpaint, that's all you get, unless you're lucky enough to unbox one of the 3 unusual effects. There was 4, but Energy Orb was kinda buggy on some weapons, so instead of fixing it, Valve decided to remove it from the game. Thanks, Valve! Anyways, other than unusual effects, there really isn't a way to customize your weapon, and that's where festivizers come in. Wow, this is totally wicked. I could put, like, Christmas lights on my gun. This is so crazy. My life is complete. Is that it? That's it? Yep, there's only one type of festivizer in the game, and it gives your gun Christmas lights that really don't look that great most of the time, unless it's themed. But if you head over to the community workshop, there's tons of really cool festivizers that I think would make great additions to the game, especially this Lunon Ticator, created by Raposa Dynamica. It's a neon light set that you can use to wrap your weapons in neon lights. They've done an excellent job creating a unique way to customize your weapons, and they come in a variety of colors and different rarities, which would only add to the value of your weapons. And they look fantastic! And to top it all off, it fits the time period of the game, as neon signs were first used in 1910 and were at the peak of their popularity by the time the 60s and 70s came around. Not to mention, we do already have the Neon Annihilator, so there's really no reason to not add something like this to the game, especially since the work is all here. It was already modeled and uploaded by Raposa. The only thing Valve would have to do is implement it, which may be easier said than done, but my point still stands. The community actively gives Valve the resources, which takes a lot of work to do, and they do it for free. Now, I'm aware there's a lot of other factors that go into this, but seeing how much support stuff like this gets makes you wonder why they don't just do it. Speaking of the workshop, if we go back to my comment on weapon unusual effects, there's so many amazing weapon effects on the workshop that I'm actually surprised Valve Valve hasn't added more already. Many can complain about the game not being able to handle it, but Valve adds new hat and taunt effects 3 times a year, and most of the time, half the effects will have a different color variant. What's worse is instead of adding it as a selectable style, they're added as completely separate effects. I believe Valve could easily add more weapon unusual effects to the game by reducing the amount of bad or bloat effects they add in favor of new festivizers and more weapon effects. Unfortunately, they choose not to. The second thing holding back Warpaints is they pick the worst ones to add. Whoever is in charge of picking the Warpaints that get added to the game needs to move aside and let me do it, because I bet I can make better choices than them and it'd still be balanced. I understand the mercenary grade Warpaints aren't supposed to be god tier, but at least make them decent. There's no reason to use most of these Warpaints because they're just not good. A lot of them are overly themed, have an absurd color palette, or they're just bland to the point where I couldn't tell it apart from others that are similar. CSGO at least releases mil-spec weapons that are decent enough to where many would still be fine with using them, and yes, they also have their fair share of bad apples, but it's nothing in comparison to the dookie dog shit we get slapped with in TF2. The third thing Warpaints are missing is personality. All these Warpaints are cookie cutter pattern based with slight differences and maybe like an eye or a sticker somewhere, but they don't compare at all to some of the weapon skins we had when they were originally released, and I have a solution. What if we took all the good things about weapon skins and mixed it with all the good things about Warpaints with some extra tweaks? First of all, I think Warpaints need to be applicable to all weapons, but to an extent. Remember how earlier I mentioned the Dragon Slayer Warpaint and how it was only applicable to 9 different weapons? Well, what if the Warhawk skins, or the High Roller skins, or the Rainbow skins were Warpaints that could only be applied to those specific weapons? It seems like a stretch, but we already know Valve is capable of doing so because the Dragon Slayer Warpaint is the only Warpaint you can use with the Dragon's Fury, and the Dragon's Fury is the only weapon where that dragon face shows up. Leave the pattern-based Hydro Dip stuff to Mercenary grade where it can be applied to any gun you want, like almost every current Warpaint, and leave the unique high-effort weapon skins that wouldn't look right on all weapons to the higher rarities. They'd still be a Warpaint, but just like the Dragon Slayer Warpaint, you'd only be able to apply it to certain weapons that it was designed to be on. If Valve didn't half-ass the introduction of Warpaints and gave them a fair shot with fully fledged out details and more customization, I think they could have been just as desirable as hats are and the perfect expansion to TF2's market. But unfortunately, due to their own mistakes, they've allowed Warpaints to become an afterthought, overshadowed by silly hats with silly effects. I highly doubt we'll get any updates to them in the future, but all I'm asking is for Valve to give it a shot. Sure, we have a lot of customization already with cosmetics, but you can't see your hat while you're playing unless you're taunting. And how nice would it be if you could have the perfect weapon, customized to your liking, to complement your perfect loadout? Well, until then, this is the sad reality of Warpaints. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you want more content like this, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Bye.
The bananas are awesome.